All right, I'll start. I'm Bert Birmingham.
Okay. Bert,
I'm
it's great to see
from
you.
Birmingham.
Okay.
And
Yeah. What do you do, Bert?
I berm hams.
Welcome to the Film Riot Podcast. Today on the show, we have Chase Smith. Chase was my DP for Ballistic. He's also done all kinds of commercial work, music videos, and tons of other projects. He's insanely talented, but I thought what was most interesting is the fact that Ballistic was actually his first narrative as a DP. Of course, he's been on a ton of sets in other roles, so he knew the dynamic and all of that, but as far as being the head of that department, this was his first narrative project. So I thought that was such an interesting thing to be able to dive into, get his perspective on, and just overall how that process was for him. But before we jump into that, I want to thank today's sponsor, which is Westcott. Westcott is, of course, the industry-leading lighting manufacturer that specializes in lighting and light control for filmmakers around the world. They have that flex light and the ice light that I'm always talking about and gushing all over because these lights are just nuts. But they also have modifiers and all kinds of other tools that are some of my favorite that I use on any of our projects. Whether you're just into filmmaking or continuously on set of feature films, Westcott has stuff that's going to make your life a whole lot easier. So make sure you jump over to filmriot.com/podcast, find the episode page for this episode, and check out some links from Westcott. But now I'm going to shut up and jump into it with Chase. So Ballistic was your first short film, your first narrative.
It was. Yeah, it was quite a first one to start on.
Yeah, which I didn't know at first. I mean, I knew your work, but I had assumed that you had done narrative. Otherwise, I never would have asked. No. So I saw your work, and your work was delicious, but I didn't know you hadn't done narrative, which I didn't think. Once I found out, I was like, that's kind of cool. Like, I dig that, like meshing two things together that might not go together normally, like somebody who maybe doesn't really enjoy horror films but really digs the project and wants to do this horror film because you're bringing something completely different to the table. So I was actually stoked at that fact.
Yeah, I think I remember that moment at the airport coming back from our first scout where you were like, what short films have you done in the past? And I was like, nothing really. And you were like, oh, cool.
Okay. You don't say.
But I did feel, you know, you have like the nerves, you want to perform well, you want to do well. Of course, there's going to be a lot of things you learn, but I felt comfortable. I felt comfortable on set, and I felt comfortable with you, and I felt, just comfortable with everything. And so I think just like that confidence moving forward and just trying to figure it out while you go in some aspects, and also like just the fundamentals of filmmaking, I guess, just making something through the use of cameras and film, is pretty similar.
It was just like, it was your first narrative, like, just to preference it was your first narrative as DP. I mean, you've been on other shit. You worked with us on the Ghost House and Chainsaw. Yeah. That you've done a bunch of others. You've been on set for a bunch of others, and you've DP'd like other major projects, just not actual narrative short films. So you're not new to this. I mean, obviously, as the end result of Ballistic shows. But how different did you find being the actual DP on a narrative piece versus like a music video or a commercial, the stuff that you have done?
I found it pretty different, actually, just in a good way. It requires a lot more, I feel like, emotion of myself to go into the piece rather than just shots, or a lot of times in commercials or music videos, you're doing things just to make sure they look cool only. It's just all about the visual eyeballs just staying wherever they need to be. And I feel like with this, I was trying to think about a lot of times, like, why was I doing this instead of like, how am I doing this? Mm-hmm. And that was a new approach, especially to like the pre-production, me getting myself in the mindset to shoot this thing that I had really never done before. And the whole way through the whole pre-production part, I was going, am I prepping right for this? We had just a little bit of time to prep together, not very much, mostly right before the film. Yeah. But the whole time I was going, I'm sure there's probably a better way for me to be prepping for this, but I'm not sure of it yet.
Right. I feel like I prep differently on every film. I don't think I've prepped the same way twice on any film. I don't know why. I'll use like different apps to do it. Sometimes I'll actually shot list out. Sometimes I won't. Sometimes I'll just do like a shot list bullet point. Sometimes I'll do a list of like the general idea of coverage that I need. Sometimes I'll board. Sometimes I don't. I don't know why. I just switch it up every single time. I guess what I'm saying was prep for this much different than you prep for like a commercial shoot or something, or were you utilizing sort of how you usually do those things, but then adding in that meaning and theme that you're talking about?
Yeah, I would say that's probably accurate. Like a lot of it is the same, but obviously you don't have pages and pages of dialogue that you need to be pretty familiar with, you know?
Right.
And that was kind of the new thing for me, is to prep for dialogue, to prep for major action, and just kind of get my mind as ready as it could be for when those things are happening. So you're kind of, so everything is really familiar in your mind as it's going on, and you're kind of, because when you're shooting it, it's just ride or die. It's go
it's
time,
all go,
you know? And that's something that I've learned on being on set, is like, you don't get to set to figure it out. You get to set to do it. And so you figure it out as much as you can before. You get behind if you're trying to figure it out on the day, and, you know, bad things can happen.
Occur. That's the main reason I like shot lists, is like shot lists, even though I don't think we stuck to, I think we mildly stuck to maybe one in Texas, like at the beginning, but for the most part, we did not stick to any of the shot lists that were built out. But I like them because it's pretty much what you're saying. It's at least like a top-down plan of, okay, this is the intention of what I'm going for, and I have time in pre-production to think out the whys, like you're saying, of why the camera would be here, why the camera would move this way, be it audience experience, be it pushing the thematics of the moment, whatever it is. That way in production, we can shift, but then shift and stay within intention still, and move fast. So it's kind of the same thing with me on that one. But going with the whys and the dialogue, you brought up dialogue as far as in your prep. Were you thinking about the dialogue with the scene anyhow, with how you were thinking about building out that scene lighting-wise?
Yeah, basically where the camera is going to be, kind of how the camera moves, and lighting too. I mean, we scouted locations and kind of walked away with rough locations. I wouldn't say we walked away like, this is exactly where this is going to happen.
In Texas, you mean?
Yeah, in Texas. Wait, did we even scout in Texas?
Yeah, we scouted.
We did.
It feels like forever ago, but it was just a couple of months ago.
It does feel like forever ago. It has been seemingly forever in between.
In LA, we had the tech scout. Well, we had the location scout, which turned into a tech scout.
Yeah.
Because both of us just flew to LA, which was so useful, because that first place, woof.
We dodged a major bullet.
Yeah. So what happened was, for anyone listening, is we went to LA, and the first place that we went, it worked for the car flip or the car gag that we did, but it didn't really work for anything else. It would have been such, like, we were just sitting there trying to figure out. Different. Yeah, it did not look like it, you know, the idea was supposed to be this like car graveyard, just like the idea of sort of death and decay everywhere, but there was like green grass and like
there was a perfectly paved road.
Yeah, paved road, a house, and we were just like, all right, well, if we don't shoot anywhere but this direction and that direction, I think we can make it work. And we were both just stressing out so hard.
I remember being so bullheaded that day, because there were a lot of people around us going, yes, this is where we have to do it. This is the only place we can flip the car, all this stuff.
Right.
And I was standing back going, But do we
don't
have to?
Yeah, there's got to be. But then somebody else is like, the lady that was with us is like, well, we own another property. It's a movie ranch right down the road. We could take a look at that. I'm like, yeah, let's take a look at that. Then we're driving in. And as we're driving in, you and I just perk right up.
Yeah. But this was like 45, 50 minutes probably into like that first location where before this was even like on the horizon for us to.
But the second we pulled in, it was like, well, this one, obviously.
Yeah.
And they were just like, well, can we just do it here? They're like, yeah, sure. I'm like, well, okay, then there we go. So then it was like, that's locked. And then we were able to just walk through and do that tech scout, which was just massively useful for me, because I was able to sort of rework the script to fit the location. But what were you sort of looking for in LA with that tech scout?
Geography, I feel like. Just like trying to place those where this world is happening in this spot, you know, like, and trying to find. I mean, another big thing for me was all the stunts, all the wire pulls, and we would look at a location and they go, okay, well, great. Like, where do you want the crane?
Right.
And I'm
like, I guess we can't do it right here then.
Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's think about that. How big is this crane? And they're like, massive.
Oh,
And it's like,
okay.
okay, cool. So, it's things like that. And that's the sort of things that I asked questions on the day because I had never done wire pulls. And I was like, well, tell me about the crane. Like, what do you need? Like, what's the footprint? Like, how much do I have to avoid, Because when you say, like, put the crane here, then the crane goes there and it doesn't move quickly.
Yeah.
So that was a bit nerve-wracking at times, but just walking away, having been in the physical location, is so valuable, especially for what we did there. I mean, we had to walk around and just like choose cars and go, maybe the car should be right here. Or maybe this is where she like ducks behind. But it is still really confusing. I mean, you're like thinking about the script, but you're also in a brand new place and you're trying to like make everything that you've seen on the screen by now, but you're trying to make all that just come alive by just walking on location.
It's totally different spots that don't actually connect, which makes it more difficult as well. So it's supposed to feel like a B, C, D, E as far as how she moves through the scenes, but in reality, from what locations we're moving to, it's actually like A, E, B, F, D. And so like piecing all together in that in your mind and okay, what's the screen direction and how this work, which area they're going to come from, and then mixing in, like you said, like all of those stunts and we have to put the crane over here or whatever it is. It can get very confusing very fast, just because of how fast paced it was. Because even in the tech scout, we didn't have a ton of time. We had to kind of like rush through and like, okay, this stuff. Okay, move on.
Yeah, and the majority was focused on the stunts. I mean,
because
there was
that was
so
like
much.
thing.
Yeah, there was so much. Just like let's talk about all the stunts.
Yeah, because I've worked with stunts before, but not on this scale. And I've directed some wire work stuff before, but not this kind. So there was a lot that was like same as you. It's like, well, what do you mean by crane? and then it was like, okay, well, we can't do it here because this is a tiny area. So if we go over here, we could do it here. And then like, okay, but then it's what time of day are we going to shoot it? Because that's going to cast like these crazy shadows of all the people. And we did end up actually casting a shadow of a crane, but nobody has noticed it just because it looks like it belongs there. It's not like the shape of people. We did on 1 or 2 scenes get the shape of people in the ground, which is very obvious that, oh, that's a person, but we just removed it.
Nice.
Magic.
It was a busy set.
Movie magic.
It was.
Yeah. There was one where you see, I don't know who it was, but in one of the action sequences, somebody had set something and run off, and you see them through like the window of one of the cars.
Nice.
So we had to like scale in.
Yeah. Like you could probably look heavily and probably find some things.
I'm sure you could find plenty.
I mean, I'm definitely used to operating. I love operating, especially like handheld stuff, even on the dolly stuff. I mean, I feel very connected to the camera. As much sometimes as I want to be behind a screen, just really picking things apart and feeling the whole thing as a whole just from a few steps away. When I leave the camera, sometimes I feel disconnected, Yeah. But in turn, like I ended up basically shooting the whole thing off of just the little small HD screen on the camera. And sometimes like that's cool, but sometimes you can miss something, because you're in the hot seat, like you're operating, you're trying to think about so many things and you've got a smaller monitor. You're not able to like really step back and go, okay, here's where we are,
Right.
But I think previously before we shot it, I was like, I really want to be at the monitor with you.
Yeah, that's what we talked about.
Yeah.
But then once we were in there, I was with you. I was like, can you just be on the camera though?
Yeah.
It's just another instance of, I talk about all the time lately. It's like, because I came from doing absolutely everything. And then slowly but surely I've been passing things off to where it's like on this one, it was just, I was a writer, director, producer. That was it. And even a lot of the producing was pushed off more than it's ever been before. So I really focused in on the writing and directing only. And the more I do that, the more it's like, yeah, this is what I do. I don't do that. Because it's like with you, I talked about with Lucas, but with you, it was like, these, some of these more cinematic camera movements that we did, like in the basement with Cambry, and she's moving, then we look up to the window and then she goes into the living room and we're dollying back with her. And then we move around and look out to see the plane. It was like we were doing it and you were at the monitor with me. And it was like, this isn't quite 100% right. And then you jumped on and then you did the move and it's like, well, now it's a movie. And I don't even know what the difference was 100%. There's just something in that very precise timing and speed that you just felt and did, to where it's like, well, there you go.
It's not anything on what anybody was doing. I think I had pre-thought about that intention of the shot, and it was simple enough, like, just to jump on and do it. That's that disconnected feeling. That
it was even like, it was even like another scene when I was operating, and I was like, I see in my head how I want this to feel, and I'm doing the shot, but it's 80% there for some reason. And I was like, Chase, you do it. And then you jumped on. I'm like, oh, that was it. That was what I wanted. And I don't know what the difference was still, but there's just a difference there. I think it's the same as like an actor. Like an actor, both actors can play the same moment, and they're both trying to do it subtly. But one has that little extra bit of magic that I just believe you, and the other one doesn't. And I can't really even articulate what that is. And I just think that's interesting that does exist in all the major creative departments. DP, the editor, the actors, all of it. That there's that bit there, composer, sound designer. There's just that extra bit, colorist. I'm just going to keep naming people that just bring that extra something that all together, it's like, well, now you have a movie.
Yeah, which was the story of Ballistic. I mean, like so many incredible people worked on this. And seeing Ruffs and seeing it come through its life, and after finishing LA and moving into Texas and just seeing all this stuff come together, it was just continually like the more people like touched it and made their mark and left their thing, like it just got better and better and better.
Totally.
And you realize like, I can't do this on my own. You can for sure, but at some point your films, your projects only get better when you invite other people in to do their thing. Yeah. And like you're saying, let it go and focus on one or two things, and just let someone else come in and like blow your mind, you know?
Totally. And it becomes very much like steering. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not doing all the jobs on the boat. I'm just steering. So when someone's going a little too much left, it's like, just veer a little bit right, just a little right. Yeah, there you go. Okay, keep going. And it's a pretty wide lane to be in. Like, there's a lot of room to move about that lane, and for each person to add their voice to and still be in the lane. Like, they have to veer pretty far to get out of the lane. So you need to shift back in. So there's a lot of room to where that's not exactly what I was thinking, but that's still the intention of what I was thinking. And I love it. Continue. And then all those voices it just becomes a choir instead of like this solo performance. And it's so much more dynamic, and it's so much more impactful because it is that choir. It's all those voices together, but in harmony, which I just think is interesting. But on set, it's like, out of everybody I collaborate with, I have to trust you the most through the entire process, because especially when we get into a scene like the living room scene, where I'm just completely dialed in on dealing with my actors, I wasn't thinking about the lighting at all. Like, we had talked about it, you had set it up, and I dug what was going on. But after that, it was just, Chase, do your thing. I don't think I really directed it after that, as far as it was just, you did what you thought was right. Even the shots that came afterwards, as we moved into coverage and whatnot, it was just me fully trusting you with all that, because I was really focused on getting what was, for me, one of the most important moments in the scene. What are those moments like for you? Because it's not like you built out the entire thing. You're shifting from shot to shot. So what are you thinking in a scene like that? Like, you set up your base light and then you just try to match that as you go?
Well, like specifically for the living room, I knew, we have 3 actors in there. We start out with 2. It really builds. We introduce our first one, and then the second one comes in shortly after, and then the third one comes in shortly after, and then there's just this triangle of, drama happening and just kind of building the whole time. Well, we didn't have a ton of time. We were definitely behind on that day. So what I wanted to do was absolutely streamline everything I could with how we set our lights, which is why we walked in there and had a conversation with Seth, my gaffer, and I said, we need as few lights on stands as possible in here, because I need to be able to turn and reverse fast. One of the things we talked about first was, like, it sounds silly, but I need to not let the lighting get in the way of this scene,
Right, yeah.
And sometimes it takes you a little bit longer up front to do that in order to hopefully move a little bit faster during the scene.
Yeah.
And
which I appreciate, especially in a scene like that, because, they get their engines going and then there's not a ton of time cooling down in between shots. We were able to just go for the most part. And we kind of had to because we had Cambry and she had a hard out at 12.
We had to, yeah.
So, yeah, we had very little time to pull.
But I walked in and I chose kind of a base ambience for the room, which is something we actually spoke about quite a bit in pre-production of how does this living room look? So we knew it was just a huge scene, and I kind of knew how I wanted the rest of the house to feel. But the living room, I was a little like on the fence about. Like we talked about actually doing it just like real dark like the rest of it. But I actually ended up bringing it up a little more than the rest of the house. And really that just like I had one softbox fixture, which was like a 650 tungsten or something. I mean, nothing fancy, just in a softbox that was, it was either on a stand or we mounted it to a door, top of a door or something like that. But that and maybe one other, I had like a light panel just a little bit on in the pointing towards the ceiling and just kind of bringing the whole ambience of the room together. And then I had 2 practicals, I believe, in the room that I really just kind of motivated off of. Yeah. That we swapped some bulbs off of. And it helps for me to walk into a room and see how the light's falling, like without me doing anything. And that's like typically the way I go when I don't have like this really complex lighting setup that I need, like I'm going to execute. So it's like, all right, how's the light falling in the room? All right, well, that lamp's obviously not in the shot. So like maybe we move that lamp and that table over there because it will be. So that gives me something to work off of, And so we made little changes like that. And then just as we went, when we'd reversed, we'd literally just like loosen a stand and just pan the light and just kind of go with it. Yeah.
It's nerve-wracking a little bit for me. Is like you write this whole thing and you have it in your head and there's a very specific vision in my head of what I want it to look like, feel like, be like. But then when it comes down to actually materializing the thing that was on paper, it's not the same. It adjusts, especially when you see the location. This is a totally different room than what I imagined. The walls are a different color than what I imagined. How we'll be able to work in light is different than what I imagined. So it's like it's all adjusting as we go. And it's just finding that, well, what's the central color of all this stuff? Like what does this actually physically look like? It's so nerve-wracking because it could go so wrong so quickly and completely shift the tone from what's intended. So that's always very scary for me, but I do get very specific. And I'm just wondering, when you read the script, you come up with your vibes. Did any of that, I don't really remember, was any of that like opposed to how I actually envisioned it and then redirected, or did it kind of just mesh right off the bat?
I actually think I remember asking you when we first dove into the project, I said, when you wrote this, like, what are you seeing? Like, I want to know the vision in the vibe, like what are you attached to?
Oh, so you got kind of a sense right up front.
Yeah, I think you gave me a couple of films and you said like, I think whenever I read this, I start to see these films kind of flash, or kind of these vibes. And I took those and I watched them and I took some stills and I then reread certain parts and then started to dive into different vibes and colors and that sort of thing. And again, this is all without seeing any of our locations. Yeah. A film that really settled with me was Panic Room. And I found several references in there that I feel like I wanted to go after, that I used as kind of a when in doubt, like go this direction, or keep that in mind. And I think that like one base image where she's like in her bedroom, it's backlit just by only the spill in the hallway. Like there's a little color tone there, and just the exposure level, I guess, of that shot was just kind of kept flashing in my head. And there's not a lot of time. You like, it can go badly very quickly. Right. Like that first scene you do in that house, you have to set the tone. There's no like, that one didn't. I'll just change it.
The next scene.
I'll change it the next scene. Yeah. You're kind of establishing like this is how the house feels. Mm-hmm. And those moments go by really quick. So I just remember, I think we started in the basement. I just remember doing a little bit of experimentation on that morning and just kind of going, all right, where's my tone coming from? Okay, so let's set that. All right, that's feeling good. So now let's work on my motivation of lights. And we had our practicals going, and then Then I went to like, all right, let's tweak my exposure now to what I want to, how I want the room to fall.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, we're rolling, and like what's done is done.
Right.
And we're moving on, so.
Yeah.
And I think everyone would approach it differently. I certainly don't think anyone should take what I do as by any means the right way. It's just kind of what is coming natural to me.
Yeah.
I guess on the day.
And so much of it is like your gut being like, yeah, that's it. Where it's like you're in the thing and you're figuring it out. Like we were talking about this yesterday. And then you're just like, yes, this is it. And you can't fully articulate it, but you know that it's it. And then later when you watch it back, you can be like, oh, this is why my gut was right. It did this, this, and this for the scene. But in the moment, it's really like your instincts that are pointing you the right direction. Of course, your instincts being informed by your experience. But I think like the green that we landed on was very much is this it? Is that it? And it's even in the BTS. I'm just at the monitor and you're toying with tones and you're like this or that. And I'm like, I think that. And you're like, yes. So it was like the same time we were both like, there it is. That's the feel. And we were both on the same page, which is great, which is probably from prep, but also from we just kind of vibe style wise.
Yeah, I think that's it. A lot of it for me is I try to keep taste. It's just a taste thing. And a lot of times you can not know what you're doing, but if you're keeping good taste in for what is appealing to you, a lot of times you won't quit working on it until you start finding that you're looking for. You know what I mean? You don't just settle or go, there were times where like we need to roll and I'm like, it's not there. Hang on. Hang on. Like we need a second.
Give me a minute.
And so there's definitely moments like that where my plan is not working, and there needs to be some tweaks, and we find a way around. And not everything's perfect, that's for sure, especially in my eyes. But I'm definitely proud of what we did, and
for sure.
It was just a blast. I just learned an incredible amount.
Yeah, it's like every project's another film school, but like the best, most elevated film
There's
school.
There's nothing like it.
And just intense film school of stress and awesomeness. I'm going to pause right there so we can again thank our sponsor, Westcott, who is the industry-leading lighting manufacturer that specializes in lighting and light control for filmmakers around the world. They are the originators of the flexible LED system, the Ice Light 2, Scrim Gym, and Fast Flags. Westcott continues to develop new products with the expectation of durability, portability, and high-end results. Whether you're just getting into filmmaking or are always on feature film sets, Westcott has and will continue to be there for all of your lighting needs. And again, I use it all the time. We have links on the episode page for this episode for some reviews that I have done. But now, let's get right back into it with Chase. And we're back. So, given that it's your first narrative piece as DP, it's a totally different way of shooting, whereas there's like continuity everywhere. We're in a scene that needs a coverage and the continuity of that coverage and fluidity from moving. How did you find that different from your other stuff, or did you just fall right into it and it wasn't even a thought process, or was it something you did have to shift on?
I think, the good thing about having a good director is
hello. Go on.
Is in moments.
Wait, are you talking about the commercial? You're talking about the commercial work?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's fine.
There were moments where I was like, wait a second. Where are we at?
Which way is up?
What are we covering right now? What's this shot for? You'd find yourself in moments like that and you'd be like, this is this, we're doing this, and then we're going to get back to what we're doing. It's like, okay, copy. There is moments where it really is moving fast and you don't shoot in order, and you find yourself confused, I feel like at times, especially when, you're kind of scrambling around. But it's definitely way different than any commercial or music project I've ever done. Just flat out way different. You can have clients sitting around and shot lists, but that shot list is pretty serious usually on a commercial.
For commercial work?
Yeah.
So you just shoot the shot list on that stuff?
Yeah, you really should, because they're timing that thing out, to be perfect. And
oh, right, yeah.
There's not usually a whole lot of finagling, with, we'll just use this shot instead. That shot's pretty purposeful,
Right.
But I guess maybe it's the ratio that you shoot in a narrative versus a commercial or music project, is just way offset. But it's just very different. It's different muscles. A lot of the same fundamentals are kicking in. But I would say that probably is one of the hardest things probably I faced was the making sure I knew exactly where we were when we were.
Yeah.
And like what was happening, what was about to happen, what had just happened, and letting the camera tell that story as it's happening, like being very intentional with what was going on, what I was letting the viewer see the scene through.
I was like, whoa, did he just run out of batteries? Plug them in so we can keep going. On the end of day 3, speaking of not knowing what's going on the end of day 3, we hit kind of a we're not going to make our day moment.
Yes.
And that was like when I came up to you and I was like, hey, man, I'm just going to have to go. And you just knew what that meant. And then we had like 2 hours left maybe to pull off like 4 hours, 5 hours worth of stuff. And then it was just all go. So have you ever experienced something like that with another project? And what is that, as the DP, the guy in charge of the image, what is that like to... It's just like, now we're doing this, like, because nobody knew what the next shot was going to be but me, and I didn't know until we were done with this shot. So it was like at that moment, those last 2 hours was literally making it up shot after shot as we went to get all the coverage and make our day. So what's that sort of... It's not ideal, obviously.
No, but it was fun. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Because you kind of...
I will admit that as well. It's always like a guilty pleasure for me whenever that happens. It happens at least once on every project. And when it does, that's when I'm having the most fun because there's no waiting. It's just like, now here, now here, now here, now here. And everybody's running and it's exciting. So it's like a sick enjoyment.
Yeah, there was a moment that we were clearly running out of our day. And we were losing actors at the end of that day. And there were just things that, like, we either were going to get it or it wasn't going to be gotten.
Yeah, and it was all stuff that can't not be gotten.
Very major moments.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show that you need, like, I mean, there's a lot of people doing stuff, but at that moment, there was a core set of people there that just clicked in. Mm-hmm. And we, like I mentioned, we Mighty Morphin Power Ranger together. And we just said, mentally, I feel like even like subconscious, we're like, all right, this is happening.
Right.
And we're just drown the noise and let's get to work. And I mean, I remember I just grabbed the smallest camera and with one lens on, and we didn't change, and we just like, it turned into a shoot you could do in your backyard, like real fast.
Especially on day 4, because it kind of happened again on day 4. Yes. Kind of. We were way more like you and I in unity on day 4 because that was more, the shots were planned. Like we both knew what was coming, but it was like both of us had a camera by the end and they were both stripped down cameras.
Yes.
And it was just
for
like,
that last scene, we were just hosing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun, and it was fun watching you do what you did, and I complimented you on how well and how awesome it was.
Yeah, tell me more.
Yes, Ryan, good job.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Chase.
It was, and we got it, and it was fun because you want to dissect and just be so intentional about everything.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, strip all that out. Let's just go for it. Let's just find an angle that's working. And I think we even talked about this, but it was kind of like, you were like, here's what I need. Here's what we're going for. We've got to get her doing this, and then him getting shot and those angles. And we were rushing around, and I remember like kind of being set, and it was like, all right, I'm set. And then moments before you called action out, like I would shift and be like, no, okay, all right. And like you'd call action. It was like that one shift was my 1 second to input things that were rolling in my mind at like real time going,
and
we need to do this.
Some of my favorite shots happen that way. The scene that we're talking about is the scene toward the end before the flashback into like the basement and the living room and all that. So it's when right after she shoots the gun and it hits his gun, he throws it to the air, explodes. So once he shoots her, comes and like rips the gun off her ankle, slams her in the hood, throws her off, she crawls. It's all that stuff. And her crawling toward the camera, which is one of my favorite shots, her crawling away from the camera, which is one of my favorite shots, both came that way of you just shifting last second and just like seeing something with the light and how she was placed. And one of them ended up being a trailer shot. It's just one of the best shots. And then when he grabs her ankle and she's struggling, there's such a great moment that I made sure got in because we're up at him and then we come down to her and she whips her head back towards the camera and it's just like this has this anguish anguished panic face, and you're whipping up and down, and that stuff that's all just not planned, just happening in the moment, feeling the scene.
Reactionary.
Yeah. And as much as like you had to trust me with, hey, we're all go, I had to trust you with feeling the scene out that way. Because usually when it's action, I'm on the camera because I like to feel the scene. But you were just nailing it. So I just didn't touch it until we needed a second camera. But it's like that stuff, I really like when we have to throw out the shot list for moments like that. When we had to throw out the shot list for the big action scene with all 7 guys and everything, that was more stressful. And I wish we didn't have to, because it was just, it's more complicated. There's a ton happening. We're all out of order like crazy. With this, we were able to go mildly chronological. So it was a lot easier to do. And then you're just in this very intense, violent scene, and you're able to just like feel it out as the audience experiencing this moment. And it came off so much better than it would have if we would have done the shot list. Like I look at the shot list later and I'm like, yeah, this was the right way to shoot it. I just think it's so much more immersive that way, because you're capturing what you feel instead of what you thought.
Yeah.
So it's more emotional, less intellectual.
Yeah. And I really liked that. I mean, those shots where she's struggling, like Hannah was just crushing that scene.
Yeah.
And there was no doubt that, like, I had the feeling of writhing around in the dirt with her, like, as she was doing that, you know? So that, like, she made that scene so easy to cover.
Yeah.
And she, like,
yeah, it's like when you get a certain level of performance, it's like they inspire you.
Yes. And that level of performance can live with fewer shots because you can hold those moments. And I do remember being handheld in those shots, and they were just, it was powerful. Like I was just being reactionary. Like I was literally trying to be a third person in the scene at that moment, you know, being very close to the action, moving with her, sometimes against her, and then locking in and kind of being in front of her, like as she's making progress away. And then, you know, he gets a hold of her again. And sometimes like the camera is kind of going kind of on his side, and then sometimes it's on her side. It's like you really don't get a sense of where this like struggle is going to end sometimes, you know. And it was super great to just almost like take a take and take a take and just kind of like really just float the scene and like find interesting angles for that, you know?
Yeah, totally. Because then you can always adjust. It's like, hey, on this one, don't do this, do more of that. But you find things that you wouldn't have otherwise, for sure. What was some stuff that you, given again that it was the first narrative, which I just think is so interesting, especially because it was pretty large. Yeah. But again, you've been on plenty of large sets, but it's just a different beast. What were some of the bigger things that you learned from this, bigger takeaways you had?
That I love it. That it is addicting, no doubt. You think about the next one, like you just want for the next one. Yeah. You know? And that's something I didn't have before. And like I didn't understand it. You need your next fix. Yeah, I didn't understand it. Like it's like, oh, everybody loves shooting shorts and films and stuff. And it's like, it seems hard, it seems fun, but once you do it, it's just very different. Yeah. And I think for me, in part, it's that reward factor once it's done, that it's just not like, it doesn't have a logo flash at the end, you know, and it doesn't just accompany a big song that just released to, you know, more people, I guess, care about the song sometimes. And it's just very different. Like it's honest. Yeah, it is. And you just dive so much deeper, and like just the amount of time we got to spend together just talking about it, and you just care about it a whole lot more. Yeah. And it's just really refreshing, at least from where I came from, you know?
That's so true. Like the difference between branded content and like something like that, which we worked with. I mean, they're sponsors, but I call them like partners because they're helping us give us a budget. I talk about it on the show all the time. Like Canon was a partner on this, but I approached them because I dug the camera and I thought it'd be awesome to use it for something at this level. And to their credit, they were all on board, and to their credit, they got what I was doing, and all the companies that helped out on this were the same thing, and they get what we were doing, and it's completely hands off with the film itself. Yeah. And then we just show BTS, and we show the stuff that we were going to show either way. And I tell them that, and they're just down to come in to help make it the best it can be. So it's still, you know, a traditional film, not a branded film. So it's like you're honestly just trying to give the audience an experience, or honestly just trying to say something. And it's so much more rewarding than branded content, which feels like, we did a good technical job there.
Yeah. I would say the other thing that I learned was prep is just very, very key on this. And I will probably spend 2 to 3 times the amount if I get to do one again, you know.
How important was it for you to know this? Like for me as a director, like obviously I needed to know the script inside and out. So it's any question anybody asks me, I have an answer for and try to pretend to be as right as possible all the time. But I have an answer for any question anybody asks, or if somebody wants to, hey, I'm going to shift this line to this, I can very quickly either say, yeah, that's fine, that works, or no, that doesn't work and here's why. How similar is that to what you're doing? Like how much did you need to know the script inside and out for where you were doing scene to scene, shot to shot?
Personally, I thought that I should know it very well. I mean, I remember one of the first things I did was you sent me an earliest draft, and I went through with 3 different color markers and started like reading and starting to take little chunks and paragraphs and like kind of, I guess, assign an emotion to it, you know?
Oh, interesting.
And then basically from there, just as like a very rudimentary, like, what's the camera doing? What's it on? Is it locked off, or is it handheld? Or
do you have like an example?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, here's the biggest example ever. So I don't know who knows or doesn't know, but there was a huge chance that the whole Texas part, the whole flashback scene of this show wasn't going to be shot.
Right.
I don't know if
I don't think we've ever talked about that. Yeah. So we originally, we shot the LA thing in a way that if I wasn't able to pull together the Texas side of it, if I wasn't able to get the additional budget we needed and crew we needed to actually pull that side of it off, the LA short would have stood on its own, but it just would have been an action scene, which would have been a bummer. Texas was like the heart of it for me. But originally, that's how we shot the LA stuff, that it would cut together and we would have a finished short film, even if we weren't able to pull together the budget for Texas.
Yeah, that was nuts.
That was crazy. That was scary. I was like, oh God, please.
So in reading that, I was reading a version of the script where those two were melded together, you know, and so very clearly, I mean, obviously in text there's a huge shift, but there's also a huge shift in camera reactions and the way it's moving and stuff. And so that was a definite line to go, okay, well, it's our same kind of character here, but the circumstances surrounding them are way different.
Yeah.
And I think the story should be told way different, you know, in terms of camera movement. And obviously there's a whole lot more latitude there for us to light stuff as opposed to LA, which was just, you know, 95% natural lighting. But in terms of camera movement, I just really wanted the camera to be very stable the entire time, you know.
Yeah, in Texas. The nighttime past memory stuff. Yeah, and I love that it was like a very clear decision to where this is day, this is night. Like they wanted to be as different as day as night, and literally that was the case. And of course, there were practical reasons for it being daytime in LA, but that's why it was shifted nighttime in Texas, so that they would be these two very opposing moments with very different, like in the future, her life is in complete chaos and thrown for a loop, and, you know, she's at the mercy of all this madness. She's just in the ocean being in mid-wave, you know, whereas in Texas, it wasn't horror, but it's that for her, it's she's living a horror movie and she doesn't know what's going to happen next. So it's that slow burn into, you know, we get to chaos by the end. And, you know, when we're outside, then it's more handheld and more chaotic. And then like we lead that direction. So it was, very, very different emotions for sure.
Yeah. And there was also things in LA where I just kind of told myself like, I don't want all the action stuff to be just shaky cam. You know? Yeah. There are things that I just like don't love, and I wanted to impart some of the things I like and don't like about some action films. And I wanted the handheld to be like reactionary, but still like very understandable and very, you know, tasteful. And so that was something fun because I really like doing handheld work, and I definitely enjoy that part.
Yeah, and I really liked how we used it too, which I think was your initial idea, is like, when the violence is coming after her, then we shift out and we're more handheld and it's more chaos. But then, you know, she gets behind the car after she was shot, and all of a sudden, boom, we're right back on the movie, and we're slowly moving in on her because, you know, it calmed for a second and she's trying to regroup, and so's the image. And I thought that worked so well, especially moving us in and out of the memories. I thought that worked really well.
Yeah, totally. It's like this moment in her mind where it just kind of clicks, and she's like, all of a sudden, like, she has a moment to chill and she's trying to bring it all back together. And as that's happening, it kind of feels like we're bringing the camera back into her, you know, and to get back into that moment. And it's just kind of one of those, like, I guess I termed it as like these gathering thoughts moments where things may have just been crazy, but like in her mind, she's like got this break and she's trying to put together the pieces of what's going on. And sometimes that can be chaotic, but then a lot of times she was just like, you could tell she was just trying to figure out what's going on. And I just didn't want everything to be handheld. And sure, for handheld, like sometimes it's easier and faster to just do it on that. But like even with the opening scene with the trunk where she gets out of it, some of that's handheld, but it's still pretty mild. You know,
Yeah,
I just didn't want to go crazy the whole time.
Totally. Yeah, agreed. And it's interesting how some shots can be so important and maybe not quite seen that way when you're watching it. But just going back to that same movie shot where after she gets shot and she pulls herself up and we're moving in as she's saying, just keep moving.
Yeah.
It's such an important shot because we just came off of this short action sequence where we kind of break out from being inside of her head and we're kind of experiencing this moment of violence that she went through. And now we have to visually bring the audience back in to fully emotionally connect with her again before we jump into her memories. Otherwise, we're just jumping to another scene.
Yeah.
But because we're fully coming in to emotionally reconnect with her, we're jumping into her memory and we're very, very specifically inside of her perspective, which I think is very interesting. And there's a few shots like that in there, but it's funny how it's like you can do, like we were talking before, that off the cuff, let's just grab it, we're grabbing it, we're feeling the scene, but then there's other things that do need to be a very specific, like this shot has to happen because this is very specifically bringing the audience into this moment. And there were definitely a handful of shots like that we made sure to make time for and get the initial plan. Were there any others that off the top of your head that you could think of? Just to put you on the spot?
Yeah.
Because I think the living room, I think anytime we introduced a new moment of any kind, like we introduced her experiencing the plane or her experiencing Mark's entrance or anything like that, I think there were very specific shots in those.
Yeah. I do like the way that we ended up leading people into the rooms of the house. I mean, we did it in the basement. We are pushing in as they kind of approach into the basement. And then as Kimberly is going into the living room for the first time, it's like a very smooth moving exploratory kind of feel, you know, like with her. And like, especially with the stairs moment where that dolly shot, which was just, I love that shot.
Where we come down from the flashlight and up to them.
Yes. So Mark is down with the flashlight, or Ryan's actually down with the flashlight. It's Ryan operating the flashlight there.
But I didn't even get a credit for that.
Well, you did the credit, so I'm not upset.
Yeah, okay. Guess it's my own fault.
Flashlight guy.
Flashlight guy.
And I mean, that shot to me is like, you know, you can not think about it, but it's one of those, like, when you go back and dissect it, it just makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'll first start by saying when I envisioned all this stuff and like started plotting out some of this stuff, I mean, the stairs were very different in my mind. I mean, they were on the opposite side facing the other way. Yeah. You know, and we walk into a location.
It's crazy how much that can throw you for a loop.
Yeah, too. It really does. You probably see in like some BTS where I'm just like standing in a corner staring. And that's just me. Like,
you just shoot the whole shot looking through a mirror to fix it.
That's just me like getting in a space going, all right, dump everything you know, change it around, and start talking to people again, you know? But that, you know, that shot's super important. There's no like wide shot to be had in that room. I mean, it was a very tight little hall. Which is funny because I feel like we both set that same shot at the same time to each other.
Pretty much.
I'm pretty sure we did. And it was like one of those.
That happened a few times.
Yeah. It was like, all right, here, I think we should do this. It was like, yes. They were both like, yes. And that's just like so, like, there's so much confidence moving forward from that point because you can then turn away from each other and really feel like you're on the same page, you know, and then catch back up later or something, you know. That was like really rewarding to feel like we were meshing really well in our first project, which was super.
Yeah. And it pretty much happened off the bat. And I think it did because we did have that tech scout in LA, which we ended up having rooms with doors that connected, which ended up happening several times.
Yes.
It kind of seemed like I did it on purpose. I totally didn't do it on purpose.
That happened twice. Ryan and I had hotel rooms that by coincidence, supposedly, we had joining hotel rooms that had the doors in the middle, and it was the best thing ever.
It was like a sleepover.
Yeah, we'd get back every night and we'd be just drained, and we'd pop the door. We'd get cleaned up, and then
separately
with doors, all the doors locked. And we'd just like get in our gym shorts and t-shirts, and then we'd open the doors and bring all of each other's furnitures into each other's room, and we would order room service, and we'd break down the script for the next day.
That sounds a lot more romantic than it was. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was romantic.
Well, I'm holding a little back, but I don't want to.
Yeah, just,
this is a
some of it's
PG-13,
private, okay.
I'm sure.
Yeah, that ended up being so useful, just plotting the next days, because it was like after the first day, it was like clearly we're not going to stick to a single bit of our plan here. Yeah. And there were a few shots like I talked about where it's like these are shots that we have to get to the plan, but every day was like redoing the entire plan for the next day and really like honing in on, okay, what is this saying? What are we doing? What do we need? So that was like crazy helpful, especially because Lucas was there too. Yes. And he brought his computer and monitor. So we were able to like look at shots from the previous day as we went as well.
Yeah.
Which
Lucas
was very
crucial
useful
for that.
Yeah. But it was nice to have Lucas involved in those conversations as well, because he could just sit there and be like, oh, we might want this for this moment, or that's why I just started calling us the Triforce. Yes. Whenever anything was going like, oh man, we can't do any of this. We gotta reorganize everything, rethink all of this. Just the Triforce came together and figured it out.
Yeah. And that worked out so well because we didn't really spend weeks in proper prep. I feel like we didn't.
Yeah, no.
We never, like, we talked about the script as a whole. You know, we would hit on points, but like.
Yeah, it's hard when it's like, you know, it's a passion project and people are either not getting paid or not getting paid very much. So then everybody's still working. So you can't take time off of making money to you know, for something you're not making money for. So it's, you know, you come together in this period of time, but pre-pro is pretty much non-existent because everybody's on the other jobs.
And we're in different cities. And,
different states.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's tough. So that was like, that was really beneficial and romantic.
Yeah.
Very romantic.
Well, I'm going to jump back to our stair shot real quick and explain what I was going to say about that. But I mean, that shot ended up spelling out so much geography and kind of tension for that scene.
Yeah.
That was like really something we did. And I was just like, man, that was like it was a great shot. It was one of those where you walk away, you're like, I really like that shot. And for a while, it wasn't in the edit, and that was hurtful.
Right.
And
it was in the first cut.
Yeah, it was.
It was in the first cut.
Yeah.
But then there was a lot of toying to figure out the pacing of that. That scene was a scene where it's just, for a moment, I lost a little bit of guts. It was just, I was a little nervous about letting that scene play because we're coming off of action and everything's like moving at a certain pace. So, and I knew I talked about it a lot in the editing vlogs. I knew the meshing of these two things was going to be tough and it was weird, and I'd never meshed two things. It's two genres butting up against each other quite literally. So I was really worried about that. So for a moment, I just had a lack of confidence in letting that scene like smash into just letting it breathe. And then I brought it back, which you helped with.
I did, I think.
Yeah. You were like,
yeah, I called it. I was like, where did the shot go?
Yeah. And then it was like, you said it and someone, I think Josh said it. And then once you hear people saying the thing that you're feeling, it's like, okay. Okay, I'm going to put that back in. And then once we did and we watched it again, I was like, well, yeah, of course. It's that. And just let that moment breathe. Because we did get some notes from people being like, pace this up, make it more tense. And it's like, but it's not like a, you know, fast pace intensity. It's, again, that thriller horror movie moment intensity building into the rest. So I'm glad we did it that way. That's what I'm saying.
For me, it just helped drive in the number one, not only just the geography of where they are in conjunction, like, you know, because it's almost like they're kind of on the same plane, you know, they're kind of in the same area, but they're still like, it's like they're worlds apart because they're just on, you know, one's upstairs. And I like that separation is there, but you also feel how close they actually are to each other. Yeah. And at that moment, you realize that they are in fear, you know, like of whatever this thing is down there. And I just like that whole, I mean, I know probably some people thought maybe it was a bit slow, but to me without it, it just felt like we were moving past some major building of like, why are they running around the house kind of quietly?
Yeah, I definitely think it needed it. And it definitely found its way back in because that geography of what you're talking about tied the whole scene together and made it work. Like without it, it was like, well, where is he compared to where they are? It was very confusing as far as where the danger actually was. It could have been everywhere, anywhere. We could have showed you the back of the house. Now we're cutting to the front of the house, and it felt disconnected. So connecting those pieces in that one shot made everything sort of claustrophobic, and I think made the intensity of the build of everything work a lot better. And plus it tells you where the basement is, tells you where he is compared to the basement, so now you know he's pretty much right above them. Yeah, so it just did a lot of things. But moving away from ballistic as we're closing up, we did shoot on the SLR Magic anamorphic lenses. And I pretty much always shoot anamorphic. I just love the look. How do you feel about anamorphic versus spherical? And if you were to choose one or the other, what would you choose, or does it just depend on the project?
I think it should depend on the project. I think there are a lot of trends and stuff that you can gravitate towards, especially like I'm young, I haven't tried everything. And a lot of times you'll want to change things up or shoot on vintage lenses or shot a project on master primes for the first time. And it just dispelled everything I thought I knew or heard about master primes. And they were beautiful. And you like walk away going, don't ever pass judgment on something without having used it, And just because it's not what everyone's using right now, like, doesn't mean you can't use it or doesn't mean it won't work for your project. That being said, I do really love anamorphic.
Yeah.
I love how it just distorts like kind of the world around the center of that frame. The majority of the time your subject's going to be near the center of the frame a lot. And I just love how it just really just blurs. I just love that. It just feels very cinema to me.
Yeah, I agree. And on top of that, I like the imperfect nature of the image with an anamorphic lens, because all of the stories I like to tell, my style leans that direction. Like I want it to feel imperfect. So I like the artifacts it introduces. I like the distortion that it introduces within reason, of course.
Yeah.
I think we didn't go on the 35 too much because of the distortion.
Yeah, it was a little wonky for me, which is the same with the Kawa 40. Like, it's just those two. Like, I just don't really pull them out very much.
Yeah, I mean, we used it a few times.
Yeah,
but when it's like wider, more of a wide shot, it works.
Yeah, if it's not moving too much, it's a little fisheye kind of feeling. I don't know. I also really like shooting spherical. Like, there are just some beautiful spherical lenses out there. I think that, number one, lenses should never get in the way of anything, between you shooting something or not shooting something, because 9 times out of 10, I would say no one could probably point out what lenses you shot it on.
Yeah.
And we had spherical lenses sprinkled throughout ballistic, and I don't think anybody's pointed those out.
But you don't think, like, if ballistic was shot on spherical versus anamorphic, same aspect ratio, we went box screen, you don't think they would feel the difference?
Yeah, you'd feel it.
Okay.
Like, objectively, like, if you put them next to each other, you definitely.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it means a lot to you when you're doing it, but if we were to shot it spherical, I don't think the project would be any more successful or less successful.
No, I don't think so either.
It would just be one of those things. I mean, we were kind of talking about lens flares, like how hard it was to like tone the lens flares on those lenses down a little bit. And did I want all those lens flares? Not necessarily in every case, but do they ruin it for me? They don't.
Yeah.
You know, like, would it have been better with or without? I don't know. It's just one of those things you just like, you live with. It's like a living piece of something that you made, and that's just how it was on the day, and that's just like what happened, and it's like unique because of that.
Yeah, kind of goes back to that same sort of honesty thing.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah,
I guess I'll ask one more thing. For getting started, young kid getting started, you went into commercial work, music video work. You've done some big stuff with that, which we'll put your stuff on the website. What would be your suggestion in getting started for somebody who wants to be a DP? What should they start doing right now?
I mean, it's a cliche answer, but they'll just shoot. I started by shooting my friends' like engagements and engagement parties and like a whole bunch of church stuff and just basically anything that, like, any reason I had to shoot a video, montage stuff. And really that taught me structure building and how to work with music and what it's like to shoot something and then see the edit finished, and why when I did the edit, then all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe next time I shoot, I'll do this instead because it gives me more in the edit to work with, or change this and change that. And I started going to school for a little film program in school for a minute, and it wasn't valuable to me. At the time it was a brand new program, and I realized that, and then basically got an offer from a friend of mine to start doing full-time video for a company, and I just absolutely took that. I was like, I'm going to do that because that is me making videos and learning, and I wanted to, it was important for me to learn by doing. And maybe I'm not the most theory-based filmmaker or whatever it is. I don't maybe know every rule, but I've been doing it, and it's comfortable and it feels natural, Yeah. That's just so important, especially when you get on something like this for me, which was a lot of work. It was a lot of stuff I had never done before, but I still felt comfortable looking you in the face and going, I can do this.
Yeah.
I know I haven't done it, but I can do it.
And you did.
And I think I did.
You did.
And I'm really happy about it, and I want to do more. And it's been one of those things in my mind where I am very hard on myself. Every project I do is not good enough for me.
Right.
That coin. It's like,
oh yeah,
both sides feel bad.
Yep.
But there's over time, one side becomes good, and you're like, okay, that feels good. I'm proud of that. But you're still but on the next one, I'm gonna change and fix all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it just is something you live with. You just gotta do it, because if you're not comfortable on set, then you won't be able to be free and creative and be able to make good decisions on the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right. Thanks, man.
Cool. Thanks.
Let's go get a conjoining room.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's do this. So that's it for today. If you want to connect with Chase online, as always, go to our episode page, which there's a link for in the notes of this episode. Of course, you can find me online at twitter.com/Ryan_Conley. And if you dug the episode and you're digging the podcast as a whole, jump over to iTunes, subscribe, leave a review, share it with your friends. That really helps us out a lot. But next week, there won't be an episode. We're going to take 1 week off because I'm going to be out of town, but then we're going to be coming back strong with Seth Worley. Seth and I are going to be diving into directing and working on getting our first feature films made. So that's going to be a really interesting one, but that's 2 weeks from now. Again, no episode next week. But until then, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.